Hey, how you doing? It's Craig back to here, and in this video we're going to be talking about the best portrait lens. In the first part we're going to go over the theory. In the second part I'm going to take you on the computer and we're going to look at real live examples shot on the different lenses. So we're going to go through the 85, the 100mm, the 135, and the 70-200. So make sure you stick around for the whole video. Now, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, look for the subscribe link. It should be below this video. If you click on the bell notification, you'll be notified if I do any live streams as well. So click on that before we get started. All right, so let's get into the theory. So we're going to go a little deep into the theory about all these lenses, and then I'm going to take you onto the computer so you can really see for yourself which focal length you prefer. All right, so let's get started on that then. So let's start with the largest lens first, the Canon 70-200. Nikon has a 70-200 version as well. And I shoot with both cameras, the Canon 5D Mark III and the Nikon D810. Now they're both great cameras, so don't get hung up on what's the better camera. So let's talk about the lenses. Now if you were shooting at 200mm at f2.8 and you switched to an 85mm lens and you were at f2.8, the background's going to be blurrier on the 200mm. So the focal range really determines how blurry the background can get. That's why with an 85mm they might go down to f1.4 so you can sort of get more blurriness on a 1.4. That's my term, blurriness. Some people might call it bokeh. But so think about that. Do you like a blurry background, and do you want to be able to get that easier? So maybe a 70-200 might be better for you. But one thing I read on the internet, so it must be true, is that plastic surgeons shoot images at 105mm of people's faces before and after surgery, because 105mm is what the human eye perceives. So anything below or above 105mm is going to distort someone's face a little. So for example, if you shot at 35mm up close, people would not look very attractive. So for that reason, most people shoot between 85mm and 135-200 because then people's faces look a little more attractive. So something to consider. Now I started with the 70-200, and here's what I found was when I would go onto the computer, a lot of images I liked were shot at the 135 range. But because it was a zoom, and sometimes I got caught up in the action, sometimes I shot at 70mm, sometimes I shot at 200. And so for me, having a zoom was just one more thing to think about. So I switched to a Canon 135 f2, and that's one thing I didn't have to think about. Because if you think about it, people shoot great images on their iPhone because it's more about the interaction and capturing the moment than having the very best camera and the very best lens. It doesn't matter how good your camera and lens are if you don't capture that moment. So having less distractions allows you to focus on your subject, on the pose, on the framing. So that's my theory behind using a prime lens. Also with prime lenses, you have wider apertures. So you could shoot at an f2 on a 135, you could shoot at f1.4 on an 85mm. Now one thing to consider though is if you're shooting with strobes outdoors and you're not using high-speed sync, you're probably going to want to use a neutral density filter or ND filter. I use a B plus W, and it's a 3-stop. So what that does is it allows me to open my aperture more on a sunny day if I'm using strobes. Now I have videos on neutral density filters on my channel. If you just go to videos, you can look for a couple of those and you can see some examples of me using a neutral density filter with strobes outdoors. You'll want to check those out. And so let's talk about that again. So neutral density filter, that's something to consider if you're shooting outdoors with strobes, if you're using an 85. You can also use it on the 135. You can also use it on the 70-200. Now I personally prefer the 135 range. In the next part of this video, I'm going to show you some examples of a shoot I did recently where I shot an 85mm lens on the Nikon D810, and then I switched cameras and I went to the Canon 5D Mark III and I shot images on the 135. And I was surprised when I got home because I do like the dynamic range of the Nikon D810. I do like the sharpness, but I found the 135, they were more pleasing, and I think you'll probably agree, but it's really up to you. Now, if you're on the fence about which lens, also go to B&H Photo and look at the reviews. Sometimes there's not a big difference between an 85-1.4 and an 85-1.8. So budget's also a concern. I don't really think you need 5 lenses. I think if you're just starting, pick one lens and really master that one lens before you decide to upgrade and get a whole bunch of different lenses. All right, so let's go to the computer now, and I'll show you examples of the 85, the 100, the 135, and the 70-200. Don't get hung up on whether it was a Canon lens or a Nikon lens. Sigma's coming out with a 135 f2. We'll talk about that soon, and I think that would be a good option for both the Canon and the Nikon. Same with the Sony. We're talking about focal length, so don't get hung up on what camera or what lens or what company. It's really about the focal length in this video. All right, let's go to the computer. All right, so in this part, we're going to go through a couple images that I shot on the 85mm and the 135. And the second portion, we're going to go through a variety of images shot indoors and outdoors on different lenses. So this is from the same shoot, and the first batch of pictures we're going to look at are shot on the 135. Now the white balance is the same. I shot the 135 images on the Canon 5D Mark III. I shot the 85mm images on the Nikon D810. So don't get hung up on what lens or what camera. Think about the focal length. Which focal length do you prefer? Do you like 135 or 85? So let's go through the first batch. If you look to the lower left, you could see the focal range and the f-stop. So I shot this at ISO 100, shutter speed 160, f5 on the 135mm lens. All right, so this first couple ones are all at the 135. So here's another one. A little bit bright exposure on that one. Here's another one again. You're going to see a big difference when I switch to the 85. Here's 135 again. It seems like the ones that I starred were way more of the 135 images, and I don't think it's because of the pose, I think it's because of the lens. Here again, we're still at 135, and even as we pull out from the face and do 3/4 length, I still prefer the 135. Now we're going to switch to 85, and let's just show you a difference. So this is 135 right there. Same person on the 85, totally different look to me. I mean, sure, this is the Nikon D810. It might be a little sharper, the dynamic range might be a little wider, but I just find that her face looks a little bit better at the 135 than it does at 85. And again, here's another shot on 85. Now, if you didn't have the comparison, if you didn't have 135 and 85 side by side, you'd be totally fine with the 85mm. It's really up to you, but I think the 85 is not as flattering. These are all 85. If you look on the bottom, ISO 100, shutter speed 160, f5.6, 85mm lens. These are 85 focal length. I still think they're good, sharp shots, but if we go to 135, it just sort of flattens out and widens the face, but I think in a flattering way, they just seem a little more pleasing to the eye to me. So I prefer the 135 range over the 85. I'll let you decide. Now in the second part, we're going to go through and look at a variety of images shot at 85 and 135 and 70-200, both indoors and out. All right, so in this part of the video, we're going to go through some different images shot on a wide variety of lenses. All right, so this first image we're looking at was shot on the Canon 70-200mm lens at 135. So note the background, how blurry the background is. So this was shot on the Canon 70-200 at 135mm. Now this shot is a composite, but it was shot on the 85mm f1.4 lens on the Nikon. And it's a composite, it's a different focal range, so it's hard to compare, it's a different person, but this was shot on the 85. Both cameras are great, both lenses are great. This was on the 85mm. Here's another image shot on the Nikon 85mm f1.4 lens. Here's another image shot on the 85 f1.4. This image was shot on the Canon 135 f2. This image was taken with the Canon 100mm macro lens. This image was shot on the Nikon 85mm lens. This image was taken with the 85mm. All right, let's do a quick comparison outdoors. This was shot on a Canon 70-200 at 135, and this was shot on the 85mm. So there's the 135 focal range on the 70-200, and there's the 85mm focal range. Different people, but you could see the background. It's a little blurrier and a different bokeh on the two lenses. Canon 7200 at 135, Nikon 85mm. Alright, that wraps up our lens comparison. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel already, make sure you subscribe before you go. We come out with a new video every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, if you'd like to share this with your fellow photographers, you can share this link on Facebook or Twitter, Google+. You can also embed this video on your blog if you want to share it with other people. Also, if you look down below, I have a link that says shutterslam.com/free. I have a link to 5 free portrait retouching actions and also a portrait lighting cheat sheet that you can download absolutely free. Just look below in the description box and click on that hyperlink. That will take you to my website where you can download 5 free retouching actions and my portrait lighting cheat sheet. All right, thanks again for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.